everyone, and welcome back to Amateur Endeavors, where we live life for the love of it. Today, we will be continuing our series on how to sew skirts in different ways. I have a new skirt that I found on Pinterest, and I desperately want to recreate it. It's been in my Pinterest board for probably a couple of years now, and I just keep looking at it, and I know I can make one. I just need a little time, a little effort, and a little ingenuity, and I know I can make it. And it's so cute, and I want to bring it to life. So that's what we're doing today. I'm gonna walk you through how I make a pattern from basically just a picture, and I'm gonna walk you through how I figure it out along the way. And then by the end of it, hopefully you'll figure out how to do it too. Maybe not the inventing a pattern thing. That's a little complicated, and there's no reason to put yourself through that. Don't be like me. Unless you find something that you really like, in which case, try your hardest. Try very, very hard. Fight the system. Create your own destiny. But anyway, today we will be working on making that skirt and recreating it. And first we've got to start with a pattern. Let me show you. Okay, so luckily the picture I found on Pinterest had a lot of different angles, different positions about the different details we need, so I have a lot of information to go on. Now initially I wanted to do the bottom portion as a circle skirt. I thought that the skirt in the picture looked like it had a lot of body, a lot of gathers, and I thought that the best way to achieve this would be with a circle skirt. Unfortunately, with the fabric I had, no matter how I folded it, no matter how I turned it, I could not make it work. And so, one existential crisis later, and rethinking my entire process, we are ready to pivot and do things just a little bit differently. So the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to use the fact that it's long and skinny, and I'm going to put it on a fold. So you take the fabric, you fold it in half, and then you make a curve that is symmetrical on both sides. And so we start from the curved edge, which I have marked with arrows here, and then we come down on that folded edge about 2 inches. Now, I'm not going to go into all of the math that I did for this. Needless to say, it involved a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I still can't say that word that defines this theory that I'm using, but just know this is how it worked. But we come 2 inches down from the corner along the folded edge, and then we go 5.5 inches across starting from that corner on the folded edge. And then we connect the 2 ends with a slight curve, and that gets us the top curve of our skirt. And then we come down from that point to the very edge of our fabric to the point where it is as long as we want our skirt. I'm going to be doing 40 inches just to give myself plenty of steam allowance, but then you just kind of follow that curve from the top to the bottom, making sure that you're maintaining the length of 40 inches. So corner to corner and so on and so forth until you go all the way across from the folded edge to the outside edge. So you're going to want to cut out about 4 panels of this. That's how many panels of fabric I have, and so I'm using as much as humanly possible to make sure that I get a full skirt. And then after that, we're going to need our waistband pieces, and that's going to take 3 separate pieces. Later on in the video, I'll actually be cutting out 4 because I didn't think things through, but for you guys, you will only need 3. The first measurement we're going to need is going to be from our hips, where the skirt seems to actually begin, to about just under our bust line where the waistband seems to end. So for me, that is 9 inches. So each one of these pieces is going to be a 9 inches tall. And that's going to be true of each and every one of them because they will all be spanning the same space. Now this one here is going to be along the outside of our waist, but first we're going to start with this one. This is going to be our liner piece, and it's going to be a solid piece. So this is going to be the full circumference of what we need for our waistband. And that we're going to need about 48 inches because once again I have to make sure that this goes over top of my hips. And because my hips are about 46 inches, we're going to make this one 48 inches around. So this main piece is going to be our liner. It's going to be 9 by 48 inches. Now these two. This top one is going to be our main piece. It's going to be the main part of our waist, and that is going to be separate from this bottom piece, which is going to be where the corset straps in. So I'm going to make this main piece about 36 inches, and I'm going to make this bottom piece about 12. Basically, we want to just make sure that it's the same width around as our liner piece, so that way when we sew them all together, everything lines up. So this one's 36, this one's 12, and this full one is 48. And that should give us all that we need for the main waistband piece. Now the only other piece that you could possibly need is a long strap piece to cinch up the corset in the back. I happen to have some ribbon that I'm going to be using, so I won't be doing this, but if you needed a strap piece, then you could just make it about 2 inches or so wide, and then however long you might think you need. We're going to say maybe 60 inches or so for this. But luckily the corset's not that big, so you shouldn't need a ton of length for it. But now we can finally start cutting out our fabric. And so this is me just taking all of my measurements, making sure that the curves are all right. It's like I am connecting from each corner piece and then connecting the two with that curve, making sure that it is all 40 inches long, so that way I have the skirt length that I need, and then I will simply be cutting it out. And with that, we have all 4 of our skirt pieces. Next up, I'm just going to be cutting out the waistband pieces, and now normally this is where I would make use of tearing things on the bias with just a nick and tear, but this fabric is a little bit finicky. It wants to fray a lot and it wants to pull apart. It's got some satin elements to it, so that's not all that surprising. So instead I will be making sure to cut everything nice and even with a rotary cutter, but you can also just do this with basic scissors. Just so make sure that you cut things nice and clean and make sure all your measurements are correct. There is an old saying that says measure twice, cut once, and that is as true for sewing as it is for carpentry where it's normally used. Alright, so after all of the math and all of the geometry and all of the cutting out, we have all our pieces. So now we just have to sew them together. So it's not going to have quite as few steps as the circle skirt had. The circle skirt was attach waistband, skirt, enclose, elastic, attach, ruffle, and hem. That was it. This one has a few more pieces. This one is scattered into more pieces, but that doesn't mean it's more complicated. We have 4 pieces of our skirt, and all we're going to do is we're going to put right sides together. So right side is blue, wrong side is black. Go figure. Because they were blackout curtains. But anyway. But we're going to sew all these pieces right sides together, small parts to small parts, large parts to large parts, and that's all we're going to do. That's simple, it's easy, and if we did our math right, which 50-50 chance on that. But if we did our math right, then that should give us a full circumference and plenty of room to get it up and over our hips and onto our waist, and then we'll start working on the waistband and attaching it. We'll also need to hem this at some point, but I always wait to do that last because I hate doing it. It's just frustrating. Curves don't like to fold it end over end to make a hem, and so it's just tedious. I wait till the end because if I do it at the beginning, then I'm not going to want to do anything else after it. But we're going to take these pieces and we're going to sew them together so we can make our skirt. Okay, so I have sewn 3 out of the 4 panels together. And as I was sewing, I came to a realization that I had forgotten about. So, with the circle skirt, there were no seams on the skirt piece itself. It was one solid piece. That meant that there was no place to hide a pocket. This one, however, has seams. So that means that we can make pockets and hide them within the seams we are creating. So I'm going to show you how to add a pocket to a skirt. Okay, so this is why I never throw away fabric until the project is done. Because I have these leftover pieces from when I cut out the skirt, and we are going to use all 4 layers to make some pockets. We only need 2 pockets, but each pocket has to have 2 layers to, hold things and not just be something random. Anyway, pockets are actually much easier than you would think. And if I had more time and motivation, I would add them to absolutely everything I own. So the basic shape of a pocket is kind of like a teardrop, but instead of coming to a point, it comes to a wide opening. And you want to make sure that the opening is big enough for your hand with a little extra space, but I am going to free draw this because it doesn't really matter too much what it looks like, so long as, it holds what it needs to. Alright, so I'm going to start off, I'm going to draw a line up here. I'm going to make use of this flat edge here. That's going to be the opening of my pocket. And to kind of measure out how wide it needs to be, I'm kind of just taking my hand and stretching it, because then I know that I will have plenty of room with seam allowance to fit my whole hand in there if it's fully stretched out. After all, most pockets you just need to, fit your hand closed in there, so it doesn't need a ton of space. So that's going to be my opening. And then from there, you just take a bit of a curve. And you bring it down towards this one. Now, if you just do it connecting it to a half circle, then you're not going to have any space to actually put anything in it, which is why you bring it down and create a little part at the bottom, and this down here is actually where your stuff is going to be stored in your pocket. So this comes in just a little bit for seam allowance to make sure that you can attach it to whatever fabric it's hanging onto, but then you just bring it down. The further down you bring it, the more stuff you can fit in your pockets. So I'm going to bring it down a fair bit, and then I'm just going to connect it to this initial curve that I had originally drawn. Again, this doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to have the basic properties of a pocket. So we have where our hand comes in, and then where we store stuff. Pretty simple. Now I'm going to cut out all 4 of these, and then I'm going to show you how we attach them to the skirt. Okay, so the fun thing about pockets is that it's actually easier to attach them before you sew the final seam. So this is my final panel. This will be my front panel, the one that faces, on the front of me. And so that's where I want to put my pockets. I've kind of measured it, and it'll be right at kind of like my hip bones. And I think that's a pretty good place to put a pocket without having to create a new seam where one doesn't exist. But anyway, I have my pocket pieces. I have all 4 of them, and we're going to attach them one at a time. We will not be attaching them to each other first. That's kind of the funny part. What we're going to do is that we're going to take them and we're going to lay them along the seam, and we're going to sew a stitch right here. Okay, so I had to pause and I had to turn it around because I realized I had it backwards. Okay, once again, right sides together. So the best way to do this is to sew them. I'm going to put the blue on the outside just so that way our inside of our pocket is black. I don't really care, it doesn't really matter, but hey, whatever. But what we're going to do is we're going to sew it along this line, and that is going to create a seam. And then when we go to attach this to our other skirt piece, this is going to be sewn together here, but it will be sandwiched in between those 2 pieces. So when we go and we attach our final skirt piece, this one will be tucked away and hidden right along the seam, and you will never see it. Not unless you know it's there. But we're going to take each piece and we're going to sew along here for this side, take this one, sew along here for this side, and then we'll take the big piece and do kind of the same thing. We'll sew them right sides together,
along with the top edge. We'll sew them right sides together along the top edge of the skirt, so that way we have pockets towards the top. And then we will go and we will sew these pieces together, pocket to pocket, but also skirt to skirt. And I'll go over that in just a second. Alright, so this is the big skirt piece with the 3 panels, and then I also have the small skirt piece with just the 1 panel, and they all have pockets now, or at least pocket pieces. So now we're on to the next part where we have to sew the final panel together as well as the pockets, and we can actually do this all at once. So what we're going to do is we're going to line up, once again, right sides together. We're going to line up our pockets and our skirts together. So that's going to be top of pocket to bottom of pocket, and it's fighting me a little bit, but top of pocket, bottom of pocket, line all the curved edges along each other, but then we're also going to go down the skirt and line up the edges. So that means all we have to do is we have to start up here, sew around the pocket, make a turn, and then go down the skirt, and then we successfully sew together the 2 panels and the 2 pockets at the same time, and then when we open it up, it will all be attached to each other, and your pocket will be here, and this will be sewed solid. Easy peasy. Alright, both seams are sewn, and now we have 2 pockets. Ta-da! Fully enclosed and ready for use. So this is now marked. This is the front of our skirt. We will not be putting it towards the back. I do not need back pockets on my skirt. Front pockets is just fine. Just fine. We'll just do front pockets. But now that the skirt is fully sewn, besides, the hem, which we won't talk about, take care of it later. But now that that is fully sewn, we now get to move on to the waistband. Now everything with the waistband, I made 2 of each one. So we're going to sew an inside part and an outside part, sandwich them together to make one piece. This is to just give us a little bit more support with more layers of fabric, because it is a cinched waistband. It has a corset back to it, but also just to make sure that I don't have any open seams facing towards my stomach that'll make me itch or uncomfortable. We don't want that. Legs, it's full on the legs. With the skirt, it's flowy enough to where I can generally ignore it, but on my stomach, right pressed up against and tightened down, I don't think so. I don't think so. So we're going to get started on that. And we're basically going to sew each one individually and then attach them together. Alright, so to begin on the waistband piece, what I'm first going to do is I'm going to take my shorter piece and attach it to my longer piece. We're going to start with the inside, because that's going to be the least complicated. If I had been thinking things through, I could have done this all in one piece and it wouldn't have really mattered. I would have had to sew one seam and it would have been done. But I wasn't thinking things through. So we have 2 pieces that are going to be very similar to the outside 2 pieces. But essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to make use of the fact that I have a pre-hemmed edge. I made use of the hemmed edge off of the curtain and I'm going to use it. And all we want to do is we want to attach the shorter piece to the longer piece. No big deal. Now for this one, we can do our basic, normal, right sides together, and then sew along the edge, right sides together, sew along the edge. But the next one, the outside piece, is going to have a little bit more finessing. More on that later. Alright, now that we've sewn the inside piece, it's time for the outside piece, which is going to be a little bit more interesting. When is it not? But now we gotta work on the corset aspect, because we have to take into account where we're putting the laces. Now, like I said earlier, we are going to make use out of the pre-hemmed edge that we have, so this is where our laces connection is going to live. And there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. You can either like sew buttonholes and you can thread the ties through that, or you could do grommets if you want to do something like that. What I have kind of decided to do is I'm actually going to take this ribbon piece that I have in the same color, and I'm going to make loops. So I'm going to use this little ribbon I have and I'm going to make loops. So that way my ties in the back can just go through the little loop and then crisscross in the back. But the way we're going to attach this is we're going to cut out, let's say 3-inch pieces. Yeah, 3-inch pieces. And then we're going to lay them along the edge of this hem. But we're going to sandwich it between the hemmed edge and then this extra smaller piece that we cut out before. And I will lay that out and show you in just a moment. Alright, so I played around with some things a little bit, and this is what I have done. So this is the small piece, this is the long hemmed piece, and then these are my little ties. So what I've done is that first I went through and I pinned each one of these about a 1/2 inch apart from each other. Let's see, and they are folded in right next to each other. Try and get this. They're folded in like this. So just comes up, comes around, goes right back down. And that's how they are pinned along this edge. And then I just took the shorter piece and laid that on top of that, and then I pinned it along that edge. And I'm just going to sew along this already hemmed seam so that way we don't have a whole bunch of seams going on. Because there's no real way for me to do this that isn't going to be just a little bit funky. There's no good way I'm going to have to be able to hide all of the seams. So this is the best way I can do it. And once we add the liner piece, then it'll all be tucked away anyway. But I know I'm not normally one to advocate for pinning things in place. I'm usually impatient and kind of reckless with it, but this is one where you definitely want to pin everything down. These are tiny little pieces, this is slick fabric, and you want to make sure that everything just doesn't move. You want it to all stay in place. And then after that, you can safely and carefully sew along that line and make sure everything's pinned down. And I'm going to do that to both sides. Alright, so now everything is sewn into place. Look at it! Look at it! So this is going to be the part that gets all scrunched up when we cinch it, and these are going to be our loops. So now all we need to do is we need to attach this piece to this piece, our inside liner piece. And we're just going to do one side because we're going to have to change things around and flip them inside out and whatnot when we attach them to the skirt. For now, one piece to the other, and then we'll attach it to the skirt. Alright, so now we are sewn all along the top edge, so all we have to do is flip it inside out. Ta-da! We have one waistband piece that seems especially large, and trust me, I know it looks like it's 1.5 for me, but trust me, it will work. Because we need a lot of space to be able to get it up over our hips, because this has absolutely no stretch. So that means we have to make the extra space and then take it in other ways, thus the corset back. But our next plan of action is that we now have to sew this to the skirt itself, and we're going to do it through this part here. So this is the liner, this is the outside piece. And we're going to sew this right side to the right side of the top of the skirt, and we're going to have to make sure that this part is on the very back part, and then it should line up perfectly. We're not going to attach this part yet until it's secured to the skirt. More on that later. Alright, so now the waistband is fully attached to the skirt piece. And so what we need to do next is we need to take this liner piece, fold it inside, and then attach it to the skirt on the inside. Make sure that all of the raw edges and seams are tucked away and hidden. And so to do that, we're actually going to turn the whole thing inside out. And it's going to be very similar to what we did with the waistband on the circle skirt, actually. So this is going to be very similar to how we did the waistband in our circle skirt. The only difference is it's going to be far bigger and that there's not going to be an elastic running through the middle. So a little bit easier if you think about it that way. So all you're going to do is you're going to take the liner piece and you're going to fold it over, and then you're just going to sew it along the edge where the skirt meets the waistband. But that'll get it tacked down and everything will lay in place. Just make sure that your seams are straight because this will be visible from the outside of the skirt. Alright, so that is the waistband fully attached to the skirt, inside and out. So now all we have to do is the small details like the straps and buttons on the front, and then hem the bottom. Then we are done with our second skirt.
Alright, so we are finally to the portion where we make those little strap details in the front. Now, as far as I can tell, they serve no practical purpose. They're just there for decoration, so they're going to be pretty simple. All you're going to do is you're going to take a long piece of fabric, you're going to fold over two ends, and then you're going to meet those two folded ends together on one side, securing it down with a straight stitch. After you've done that, you can take the two open end pieces and you can just kind of tuck them into themselves. So just push it into the inside of that little strap, and then once again secure it down with a straight stitch along the edge here. So once you've done that and everything is secure and all your raw edges are tucked inside, I am going to sew some buttonholes. You can do them by hand with a needle, or you can do them by machine like I am doing. So the good thing about doing it by machine is that it is far faster and easier. The unfortunate thing is that you have little control over what might possibly go wrong. And so the only thing you can do is watch and pray that everything goes well. Luckily, luck was on my side and I got all 6 of my buttonholes sewed onto our little straps. Now I'm going to use these buttons. They're kind of old and they're a little tarnished, but I've had them forever. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cover them with fabric. It's actually a pretty simple process. You take your button and stick it onto the fabric of your choice, and then you kind of trace a circle around it. And you want your circle to be about the width away from the button as the connector piece is from the edge. And you basically just freehand trace it all the way around the button so you know how big you want your fabric to be. After you've had your circle cut out, the next portion is to just take some thread and stitch around the edge of your fabric. It doesn't have to be very clean, it doesn't have to look really pretty, it just has to be enough to hold it into place. And this is one of the few occasions where you don't really have to worry about raw edges. It's all going to be tucked away anyway. Then you take your button and you stick it in the middle and then just pull the string tight. And that will get your button wrapped up nice and neat in fabric. Now this has some details that are poking through, so I'm gonna probably fill it with something squishy so those don't show up, like some cotton or whatever, but for now, this is our button. Fully enclosed in fabric and looking nice, and we can still get to that little connection piece on the back end and attach it to our skirt like normal. Now, before we attach it, we do want to lay down our straps and make sure we know exactly where we want our buttons to go. And then we're going to mark them with pencils so that way we know where to attach our buttons to. That way we can just stick them on easy peasy. After that, you just sew the button on like normal. It's mostly just a whole bunch of loop-de-loop-de-loop-de-loops to make sure that the button is nice and secure to your skirt. After that, the only thing left to do is to attach those little straps onto the skirt through the buttonholes, and then hem the bottom of the skirt, and after that, we are finished with our project.
Well, that does it for today's how to make a skirt video. This is the second in our series, and I think it did very well. I think that the cinched waist is very cute. I was worried a little bit about where it sat, but actually I kind of like that this is almost a full-on underbust corset that just leads into the nice long flowy skirt. I was a little disappointed that we couldn't go full circle skirt, but I think we figured it out and it turned out really, really well. I love the color, I love the fit, I just think it's so cute. I have a couple more videos about how to sew different skirts coming out in the near future, so I hope you will join me for those. But until then, thank you for joining me, and remember to live a life full of love. Bye!